The Institute to most, the boogeymen of the Commonwealth. To most, their synths are terrifying creatures of mystery and the night, stalking the people of the Commonwealth. To most, the Institute are a hostile, evil faction of mystery and hidden ones, who prey on the people of the Commonwealth. But to some people, some within the Institute, they are humanity's last and best chance for a clean start, of guaranteed survival for the human race. In the last video, we took a look into the deep morality of the Brotherhood of Steel. Now in this video, I want to do the same thing, but for the Institute. In this video, I'm going to be going through some different categories to judge how moral the Institute as a faction are, and then I'll be giving them a percentage rating and number out of 100 to assess how moral they are on different matters, so we can get an overall picture to see how moral they are as a faction as a whole, at the end, once all the percentage numbers have been added up. Before I continue this video, however, I would ask that you all like and subscribe to the channel, and also turn on the bell notification. Your support means a lot to me, and I truly thank you for supporting the channel by watching this video. If you like this video, feel free to comment down below how moral you think the Institute are from Fallout 4 2. Thank you for watching the video, and please enjoy. Now to start off this video, I'm going to go over what the Institute's base goals are, and evaluate whether or not they are moral goals on their own or non-moral goals. Well, the Institute's main goal is a very simple one. Their whole goal in general is to obtain the beryllium agitator. I'm gonna get so sick and tired of saying that.
Sick and tired of being a nobody. But most of all,
this device, when used at its full force and capability, will power their entire underground city/base. Now that in of itself is not an unmoral goal, but it also doesn't sound great. They don't want to help the people of the Commonwealth at all, and they later actually go on to hurt many of the people of the Commonwealth themselves. They don't want to take down raider gangs or groups in the Commonwealth, or super mutants that they themselves actually unleashed onto the people of the Commonwealth, but we'll get onto that a bit later. They do also go on to wipe out 2 factions on their path to getting the beryllium agitator, / also after getting the beryllium agitator in the process. Those factions, of course, being the Railroad and the Brotherhood of Steel. They also end up having courses wipe out entire civilizations of people above ground, trying to make the Commonwealth a better place. However, none of that matters right now, because this section of the video is to evaluate whether their goal at its core was a moral one. The beryllium agitator is at the old mass fusion building, which is currently occupied by no other factions, meaning it's no one else's land or belonging. So them taking it is not a problem in my eyes. However, you could argue that it was selfish for them to take that much power for themselves. So I let you guys decide whether or not you thought it was morally okay for the Institute to take this piece of technology for themselves. And I would come to be very surprised that a whopping 67% of you all thought that the Institute simply taking the beryllium agitator was a morally wrong thing to do so. Which is fair, because one could argue it was never theirs to take, and any other faction, or even the people of the Commonwealth themselves, had more of a right over the Institute, or the same right to this level of power than the Institute does. So for those reasons, I'm going to have to give the Institute a 30% moral rating for their main goal, as you guys decided it was not morally okay for them to take the beryllium agitator. Now it's time to talk about what the Institute does for the average Joe of the Commonwealth, so your normal everyday person. And I'm just gonna say it straight off the bat, they are quite literally the worst faction for the average Joe ever. In the last video, we looked at the Brotherhood of Steel and what they did for the average Joe, and if you thought they weren't great, then oh boy do I have a rude awakening for you, because the Institute are so bad for your average Commonwealth Joe. Oh, what's going on here?
Put the gun down now!
He's a Synth! He'll kill us all!
Kyle, no! Okay, show's over. There are no synths in Diamond City.
That it makes the Brotherhood of Steel look like actual saints. To start with, the people of the Commonwealth and Boston live in a constant state of fear thanks to the Institute's synths, who are known for taking people in the night and replacing them with a synth clone, which of course would scare the ever-living shits out of any normal person and any normal Joe. Not only that, but this leads people to be so paranoid that they kill their own friends and family out of fear of of them being replaced with synths.
No!
And it also makes you, if you're an average Joe, the target of being accused of being a synth and then being killed for it.
No!
So even if you're not a synth, you're now at risk of being accused of one and then basically murdered. You're especially at risk of being taken if you're smart or a scientist or a person of power. Which brings me on to my next point. The Institute will not only kidnap people to help them in their operations, but they also straight up just send Coursers, their most strong, smart, intelligent, and sophisticated synth unit, to wipe out entire settlements of people or leaders they don't like. Now, why do they do this? I have zero idea.
That's a great question. I've been wondering that myself.
Considering they live under the fucking ground, they shouldn't need to kill people trying to make above ground better for themselves and a better place. But hey, I guess they just got a bit bored and did it for the shits and giggles, or something like that. I have genuinely no idea. There is genuinely zero reason for them to be straight up killing people for trying to make the above ground world and the Commonwealth a better place. I mean, I know the argument that they like to use is, well, if the above grounders become too strong, they will discover the Institute and wipe us out. It's not like we're one of the strongest and most technologically advanced factions for the entirety of America. That's so silly and just stupid. You would like to think that the faction with the world's greatest minds behind it would be able to come up with a better reason for straight up fucking killing people trying to make the world a better place than we're scared that our secret base is going to get found out by the guys above ground. Quite possibly the worst thing the Institute did for the average Joe was an experiment with the FEV virus, which led to a super mutant outbreak on the surface of the Commonwealth, which to this day they have not managed to contain or even attempt to eradicate. They basically just leave super mutants on top of the Commonwealth to just, do their thing, I guess. They make no attempt to stop raider gangs or any other factions or groups wreaking havoc on the people of the Commonwealth, and they basically use the Commonwealth and Boston as a dumping ground for their failed experiments and a place they can have fun and toy around with the people there, the poor innocent fuckers living there. And at any opportunity they have, they are more than happy to steal from the people of the Commonwealth and take their land off of them to use it as a checkpoint for their synths and their hired murdering mercenaries working for them. That's right, they actually hire mercenaries, some of the most murderous kinds, to do their above ground surface work, dirty work. So overall, the Institute doesn't help the average Joe in any kind of way. In fact, I would go as far to say that they do the most amount of harm to the average Joe out of any other faction in the Commonwealth, and they actively harm people when they can, treating the Commonwealth more of its experiment dumping ground than actual people living there, and its Commonwealth people as the fucking experiments. So basically, they suck for the people of the Commonwealth and do not do good for them at all. So for that reason, I'm going to have to give them a rating of 5% on the moral scale for what they do for the average Joe. Now I'm going to talk about how the Institute conducts their movement around the Commonwealth to see what they do and if they invade or illegally enter anyone else's land or space. Unlike the Brotherhood of Steel, who we looked at in the last video, the Institute is native to the Commonwealth. Therefore, they already have their own base set up under the old CIT ruins. This base has always been theirs, and they made it themselves. Therefore, I can safely say their base was not taken from anyone and does not intrude on anyone else's land. Now, the hard bit comes in trying to justify the Institute's troops movement and identify the Institute's troops movement around the Commonwealth. Because unlike the Brotherhood of Steel, the Institute doesn't really move like a normal army would. They don't really send synths in groups to patrol or set up checkpoints until they have already become the most strongest faction in the Commonwealth and won all their major battles, leaving them at the top. And when they do this, they don't intrude on anyone else's land. All they do is patrol the Commonwealth and Boston and set up checkpoints in the middle of roads and streets, just like the Brotherhood of Steel do and any other faction would if they won, so they get a pass there. The only place they do intrude on that you could really make a really strong argument for is after the mainline story, they do send patrols into Diamond City itself, which we know is an offense, so they would be intruding on land there. The real hard bit comes, however, trying to understand individual synth movement. Like I said before, the Institute replaces people with their smart Gen 3 Corsa synths. This means these Gen 3s often enter places they are prohibited, such as Diamond City, kill a person in charge, in this case the mayor, and then replace him with a synth clone. This is highly unethical and illegal, well, obviously.
Well,
No shit.
And they do this all over the Commonwealth and all over the place. Not to mention, they also send courses to just straight up wipe out entire communities of people they don't like, which of course is trespassing on land and invading someone else's territory. And these communities they wipe out, most of the time, are just normal everyday people who they don't feel comfortable having around as they've gotten a little bit too strong for their liking. Not a faction they are actually at war with. So while their movement of their normal synths may be okay, their Gen 3's movements, and even sometimes when they just deploy a strike team to kidnap someone, which is highly illegal and an unethical use of movement across the land. So that means, in my opinion, their overall movement is very unethical and highly illegal. Entering a restricted area and invading someone else's land to not only kidnap / kill them but replace them with a synth clone of themselves is straight up fucked up. There are also frequent areas that the Institute do go to and send synths to take control of, and they also do have some Institute Gen 1 synths just dotted around multiple places in the Commonwealth, holding them up as theirs, such as the place you go to with Dance in the first Brotherhood of Steel quest, other places around the swampy areas of Boston, and even some desolate buildings in Boston itself. But I'm gonna also give them a pass for these two because there's no evidence to suggest they were ever owned by anyone else. However, it is strange that they're dotted around these places considering they're supposed to be a big secret. So for that reason, I'm going to be giving them a 20% moral rating for how they conduct their use of movement around Boston and the greater Commonwealth. The Institute are very strange when it comes to actually conducting and fighting a war. As a mostly scientific faction in the game, you would think they would have a really deep reason for why they have to destroy the Brotherhood of Steel and the Railroad. But they don't. They basically just say, the Brotherhood of Steel gotta go, and can't be reasoned with, even though they make zero attempts to reason with them. They say the Railroad gotta go, bro, which is kind of based, I can't lie.
I'm Barack Obama, and I approve this message.
They also, just like the Brotherhood of Steel, don't actually tell them that they are at war with them and that they are actively viewing them as enemies, which of course is a war crime, as your enemy kind of needs to know going to be shooting at them before you do so. Now, how they conduct their war themselves, like I said, is really strange, because for a while, in fact, most of the game, and most of the story, and most of their active war, they kind of just refuse to engage with the BOS or the Railroad. The Institute use wave-based tactics to fight most of their battles, sending in Gen 1 synths first, then Gen 2 synths, and then finishing off their foes by sending in their Gen 3 courses to wipe out whatever remains. It's a shame they don't actually put in place these tactics until the very end of the game and the war. In battle, however, this tactic is extremely effective, and on the very few times they don't use the tactics, they almost always lose, as it takes about 5 Gen 1 synths to take down a single Brotherhood of Steel Knight in power armor, 3 Gen 2s, and 1 Gen 3 if they're lucky. The Institute themselves in war are not quite as brutal as the Brotherhood of Steel. They don't target groups of people based on race like the Brotherhood of Steel do, like they do with ghouls. Even though they don't to a degree in Fallout 4, I could definitely see the Brotherhood of Steel, like I brought up in my last video, committing some war crimes against ghouls and being very passive to civilian casualties, which they are, proven through the Battle of Bunker Hill. However, that being said, the Institute aren't much better, because if there's a battle going on and there's civilians in the area, they're completely fine with actively shooting through the civilians to shoot their target. They're also okay with killing children, as they are more than happy to blow up the Pridwin, which has children on board, and not give it a second thought about the kids.
What would you do if there was a child right in front of you?
They are also more than happy to kill those far weaker than them, such as the Railroad, and try to make no compromise for them. They fight from the shadows, starting off being annoying, sending some synths that a faction can easily handle, soon turns into a full-fledged wave-based army of robotic mechanisms at your feet. Before you can do anything about it, of course, you're overwhelmed. They are also okay with placing civilian lives at risk in the Commonwealth, like I said before, by fighting massive multi-faction battles in the middle of popular towns like Bunker Hill. kill, and disregarding civilian life completely. However, they do a better job than the Brotherhood of Steel did at avoiding civilian casualties. Even though they don't try to, at least they kind of successfully do it better than the Brotherhood. Overall, they don't really fight a moral battle when it comes to their battles with the Brotherhood of Steel, or even when it comes to everyday normal people. So I'm going to give them a 40% effectiveness rating on the moral scale for how they conduct their war. Now it's time to look at how the Institute treats their men. This question is actually quite interesting, as it all depends on what you would class as the Institute's men. Now, like I said before, the Institute doesn't really have a normal army like other factions, which sends actual, well, human soldiers out to fight its battles and fight for them. Instead, the Institute opts to send robotic synths, which are of course robot mechanisms. Now therefore, this would sound like a very easy question to answer, because machines of course don't have rights. Gen 1 synths work just like normal turrets do, except these ones can follow orders and can move around and shoot a gun at an enemy while following commands. But that's all they can do. There's actually nothing going on up there in that head of theirs.
Do you ever look at someone and wonder what is going on inside their head?
Sorry I tricked you, but thanks for clearing out the geckos. Now I can get to that stash up there, after I deal with you.
So therefore, it doesn't matter how the Institute and its people treat Gen 1 synths in question, in my opinion. However, what about Gen 2s? Well, they are more made for combat. They have armor, and they are stronger and smarter with this version of the synth. So once again, I'm going to say, it doesn't matter how you treat these things, as while their intelligence has increased, it's only really a robotic intelligence that's increased. You can't have conversations with these things, they don't feel any emotions, there's nothing going on up there once again.
Do you ever look at someone and wonder what is going on inside their head?
You know what happened? What, you didn't hear the shouting? Guy pulls a gun on his own brother, thinking he's a synth. It's that newspaper's fault. Got people all riled up, thinking their own family might be replaced by machines. Look, I'm sorry you got caught up in all this.
However, the real issue comes with the creation of the Gen 3 synths, or the Coursers. These synths are not normal robots in this instance. They are genetically and fabrically made with real DNA. They are sentient and have a very deep understanding of everything going on around them, as well as your average human does. Most importantly, they have emotions. So I'm going to say it does matter how you treat these synths, as the majority of people who's played Fallout 4 would agree that the Gen 3 synths, because of how human-like they are, need to be treated at least at the equivalent level as your fellow man. So how does the Institute treat these synths? Well, not very fucking well. The synths in the Institute are treated like machines, all of them. In the eyes of the Institute, their only purpose is to serve. If that means dying in battle, so be it. If that means always working day in and day out, like a dog,
and I work like a dog, day and night.
In this instance, that's okay for the Institute. Well, and in every instance for that matter, so be it. If that means getting 0 rights, so be it. The Institute does not care. And this is a huge issue, because in nearly everyone's eyes, like I said, Gen 3 synths in Fallout 4 should have rights and be treated like humans. So therefore, their treatment for the Gen 3 synths, in my opinion, is completely unacceptable and disgusting. Basically, enslaving them as if they are slaves to the Institute. They have no rights, they have no way to escape, and they're generally being tortured nearly every day, having to live the life they are. This is of course morally very wrong. As for the humans in their ranks, if you're a mercenary, you're on your own. Good luck with that. You have 0 help outside of being given your orders. However, if you're a scientist who stays inside the Institute for 90% of your life, and in most cases 100% of your life unless you're a very special person who gets to go to the surface, then you get quite possibly the best treatment ever seen in a Fallout game, with a warm bed, a full bedroom for yourself with a working shower and even baths, and even a doctor within the Institute, who of course will fix you up whenever you need using the best technology around and available at the time. The only thing that's really strange is that they get all this great care and great stuff and great rights, but the Institute, once under attack from any faction in the game, especially the Brotherhood of Steel, who break into the Institute and immediately start murdering scientists left, right and center, they completely completely refuse to order an evacuation order, which is absolutely hilarious. Like, by that point, the Institute is definitely going to fall. There's nothing they can do. But they refuse to initiate an evacuation. You yourself have to pass a speech check with Sean to get him to give you the code to initiate an evacuation. Like, damn, they are really one for going down with a ship. That is very strange, but I guess that's how they are. So overall, I'm going to have to give the moral rating for how they treat their men a 15% effectiveness rating, because let's face it, it's not very good. Now that we've looked at everything around the Institute's main quest, it's now time to look into their main quest itself and see what it involves. I already said earlier on in the video that the Institute's main goal is to obtain the Beryllium Agitator, but now we need to look at everything they have to do in their main quest to achieve this goal, and what they do after it. The good thing is, the Institute's quests actually have you, in a way, help the Commonwealth. Well, at least one of them does. As your first quest with the Institute is to take out a gang of raiders and retrieve a deviant synth who's joined them. This, of course, is very good for the Commonwealth and its people, as you're getting rid of a gang of raiders. One of the other quests has you helping out with an internal issue in the Institute, and one of the other quests has you help the Institute obtain a smart person in the Commonwealth, which can be resolved peacefully between the Institute, the Minutemen, and the person they need to obtain. But the main issue comes not before obtaining the Beryllium Agitator, but actually afterwards, as this is when the Institute will take out two factions. However, for now, I'm only going to talk about one of them, as the other one is the Brotherhood of Steel, which needs to be assessed differently, as they are the Institute's main enemy. Now, the only other faction the Institute wipe out during their war in the Commonwealth outside of that Raider faction, which I'm not really counting as they're just a Raider faction, is of course the Railroad. The Railroad's main ideology is the freedom and liberation of synth lives. This of course contrasts and goes against with everything the Institute stands for. However, that being said, neither faction directly declare war on each other. The Railroad fight from the shadows and have been fighting the Institute for a lot longer than it appears the Institute have been choosing to respond and fight back to them. As the Railroad started off as clearly just an annoyance to the Institute, they have now turned into a real thorn in their back, and sometimes a threat to the Institute. The Institute knows that they are a stronger, larger, and more powerful faction that could easily stomp out the Railroad, but still don't choose to try and come up with any other way of dealing with the situation and dealing with the Railroad. Not only that, but they also take no prisoners and wipe all of the Railroad agents out, showing no mercy. However, the Railroad at the same time aren't much better, not trying to negotiate with the Institute, and most of their agents hide their identities and fight from the shadows, using guerrilla warfare tactics to kill the enemy. So they could be seen as a terrorist faction, or a freedom fighting faction, depending on who you are. So therefore, are the Institute in the right for wiping out and destroying the Railroad? Well, I let you guys decide. In the end, you guys concluded that it was not right for the Institute to wipe out the Railroad. Therefore, I have to fail them here. So I'm going to have to give them a moral rating for taking down other factions of 45%. I can't give above 50 because you guys failed them here, but I think under 45 is kind of unnecessary, as they do only exterminate one other faction while we see them in the game. The Institute's main plan to take down the Brotherhood of Steel involves using the Brotherhood of Steel's main weapon against the Liberty Prime. The Institute will destroy 3 jammers so that they can teleport into the Brotherhood of Steel's base. From there, they will make their way to Liberty Prime, hack it so that it turns against the Brotherhood of Steel, and then use it against them to destroy their own Pridwin and Liberty Prime in the process. I personally see no issue with this plan, as they are using the Brotherhood of Steel's own weapon against them, so the plan gets a strong pass from me of 90% effectiveness for their plan on terms of a moral level. Now for the main part. How moral was the taking down of the Brotherhood of Steel? Well, it was very moral, and at the same time, it really wasn't. The Institute send in the player to destruct the Brotherhood of Steel's jammers. Once this happens, the Institute can send in and relay in all their synths they need to help the player out to get to Liberty Prime and to secure him, and then allow the hack to take place, in which the player will then need to hold off with the synths and the rest of the Institute, the rest of the Brotherhood of Steel forces desperately trying to take back Liberty Prime, in which once the hack is complete, Liberty Prime will turn on their allies and then blow them up. So the battle itself is very moral, both sides engaging in fair combat. In fact, the Institute kind of being at a disadvantage in a lot of ways. They have less men than the Brotherhood of Steel, and they have to relay in men only after all 3 jammers are destroyed before they can actually begin their main attack. They're also on Brotherhood of Steel turf, so this puts them at a massive disadvantage to the Brotherhood of Steel. They also, of course, only kill Brotherhood of Steel army soldiers fighting back at them in this battle, which makes it very moral. However, there is a big problem with all this, and that's that while they are moral in the battle itself on the ground with the Brotherhood of Steel and with the Institute, the same can't be said for the people on board the Prydwen. Now what I mean by this is the Institute kills the Brotherhood of Steel's main forces on the ground. They do this as they wipe out Paladin Danse, they wipe out Proctor Ingram, and most of the Brotherhood of Steel's forces. They even kill Elder Maxon, the very backbone of the Brotherhood of Steel. And once he's dead, you kind of lose all of the chain of command, especially considering that multiple Proctors are dead, Sergeants, and even Paladin Danse. This leaves only a few Brotherhood of Steel troops left, and the people on board the Prydwen. Now, instead of offering the remaining lives on board the Prydwen, which includes doctors, fellow scientists, and even children, the chance to surrender and survive, they instead destroy them, deciding to still make Liberty Prime turn on the Prydwen and blowing it up, killing everyone on board, bringing everyone to a merciless end. This is not moral at all, therefore heavily affects the rating, as while their combat and fighting on the ground is moral, their destruction of the Prydwen and the airship with no alternative for the people on board is not. So I'm going to have to give them a 50% moral rating for achieving their goal of destroying the Brotherhood of Steel. But what about a world where the Institute wins this end battle? A future where there is no Brotherhood of Steel in the Commonwealth. A future where there are no free synths. A future where the Commonwealth is left to die alone, while the Institute creates humanity's new home under the ground, giving the human race the fair restart they deserve, using the best medicines, the best technologies, and the best teachings to restart the world, but this time under the ground, and make paradise for everyone within the Institute. Or maybe the Institute is destined to fall as the Brotherhood of Steel reinforcements come and wipe them out with ease. Or even if they don't, the world above will forever be doomed to a world of suffering and a world of death, as the Institute continues to send its coursers and synth to disrupt normal everyday people trying to make better of themselves. But depending on who you are, you may think this world of the Institute is great, or this is a world no one would want to live in. For this reason, I personally am going to have to give this vision for the future a 10% moral rating, as it abandons synths, it abandons the people of the Commonwealth, and it abandons so many moral levels of dignity that I can't rate it any higher for the people of the Commonwealth. Now finally, here are the final stats for the Institute on a moral level. And with that, I want to say thank you guys ever so much for watching the video. It really does mean a lot to me. If you enjoyed the video, please do consider liking and subscribing and hitting the bell notification to stay informed on when I upload. Your support means a lot to me, and I really hope you enjoyed the video. Also feel free to comment down below what you think of the Institute and how moral they are when compared with the Brotherhood of Steel, another faction we've looked at. Do you think they're better? Do you think they're worse? Or do you think they're pretty much the same? Two bad apples or two good apples, depending on who you are. Thank you guys ever so much for watching this video. We've got more fantastic content coming up next week, so stay tuned for that. Thank you guys, and stay safe guys, and peace.